My parents always said the same thing whenever they looked at me. We just want you to be somebody. They said it when I was 16 and brought home a report card they thought wasn't impressive enough. They said it when I graduated college with honors, but chose to work for a small technology company instead of joining my father's business. They said it when I turned down a promotion because I wanted to build something of my own. And they said it most often whenever my younger brother, Daniel, accomplished something. Daniel became an attorney. Daniel bought a luxury apartment. Daniel married into a wealthy family. Daniel was the son my parents proudly introduced at every dinner. I was the son they introduced with an explanation. This is our other son. My name is Ryan. I'm 31. And for most of my adult life, I believed I was disappointing my parents. The strange thing was that I wasn't failing. Not even close. I simply wasn't becoming the person they had imagined. When I was a child, my father wanted me to be like him. He owned a successful construction company and believed stability was the most important thing in life. Get a good degree, he would tell me. Get a respectable job. Don't chase fantasies. Daniel listened. I didn't. I loved technology. When I was 14, I took apart an old computer my father had thrown into the garage. I spent 3 days putting it back together. It worked. Barely. But I was fascinated. I started teaching myself programming. While other kids were playing video games, I was trying to understand how those games were made. My mother called it a phase. My father called it a waste of time. Daniel called it weird. I didn't care. For the first time in my life, I had found something that made me forget to look at the clock. By college, I was building software for small businesses. I graduated with honors. My professors encouraged me to start my own company. My father encouraged me to apply for a government job. We argued about it. You need security, he told me. I need freedom. Freedom doesn't pay bills. I'll figure it out. He shook his head. You always think you'll figure everything out. I smiled. Maybe I will. After graduation, I accepted a job at a small technology company. It wasn't glamorous. My salary wasn't impressive. I shared an apartment with 2 roommates. But I learned everything I could. I learned how companies managed employees, how contracts worked, how clients were acquired, how budgets were created, how businesses failed. Most importantly, I learned what customers actually needed. After 6 years, I became one of the company's youngest project managers. My father barely acknowledged it. When I told him about my promotion, he asked, "How much are they paying you?" I told him. He shrugged. "Daniel makes more." I laughed. "Daniel is a lawyer." Exactly. That was how every conversation went. Everything became a comparison. If I earned $70,000, Daniel earned $90,000. If I bought a used car, Daniel bought a new one. If I rented an apartment, Daniel bought property. If I worked late, Daniel was building his career. Eventually, I stopped telling my parents things. It was easier. Then came the Friday evening that changed my life. My mother called me. "Come home for dinner." "Tonight?" "Yes." "Is everything okay?" "Of course." But something about her voice made me suspicious. When I arrived, I noticed Daniel's car in the driveway. I almost turned around. But I went inside. My parents were sitting at the dining table. Daniel was there too. Nobody was eating. There were papers spread across the table. My father pointed to a chair. "Sit." I sat. My mother smiled. "We've been talking about your future." I looked at Daniel. He was staring at his phone. "My future?" "Yes." My father pushed a thick envelope toward me. "We found you an opportunity." I opened it. The first page was a contract. At the top was a salary. $52,000. I stared at it. "What's this?" "A position," my father said. "As what?" My mother answered proudly. "Executive assistant." I blinked. "To whom?" My father hesitated. "Daniel." I looked at my brother. He finally put his phone down. I thought he might say something. He didn't. I turned back to my parents. "You want me to work for Daniel?" My mother smiled. "It's a wonderful opportunity." "For me?" "Yes." I flipped through the contract. The responsibilities included managing Daniel's schedule, preparing reports, coordinating meetings, handling travel, communicating with clients, and being available outside normal business hours. I looked up. "This isn't an assistant position." My father frowned. "What do you mean?" "This is a senior operations role." He shrugged. "Call it whatever you want." "And you're offering me $52,000? That's good money." I laughed. I couldn't help it. My father looked offended. "What's funny?" "Nothing." I looked at Daniel. "Does he know about this?" Daniel sighed. "Yes." "And you agreed?" He looked uncomfortable. It's a good opportunity for you. That sentence hurt more than I expected. You actually believe that? Daniel looked away. My mother interrupted. We just want you to be somebody. There it was. Again. That sentence. The same sentence they had been using for 15 years. But this time, something clicked. They weren't telling me I wasn't somebody because I had failed. They were telling me I wasn't somebody because I hadn't become what they wanted. I slowly closed the contract. No. My father's eyebrows rose. What? No. My mother stared at me. You didn't even think about it. I did. For 5 seconds. For years. My father leaned forward. You have no idea how lucky you are. I looked at him. I know exactly how lucky I am. Then why refuse? Because I don't want to spend my life working underneath my brother just so you can tell yourselves you finally made me successful. My mother's face tightened. That's not fair, isn't it? I looked at Daniel. Do you know what the worst part is? He didn't answer. You could have offered me a real opportunity. I tapped the contract. You could have asked me to help build something. But you didn't. You offered me a job that makes it very clear where you think I belong. Daniel looked down. My father stood. You're being arrogant. No. I stood too. I'm finally being honest. My mother began crying. We only want what's best for you. I softened for a moment. I know. Then take the contract. I shook my head. I can't. Why? Because I don't want to be somebody you can finally brag about. I picked up my coat. I want to be somebody I'm proud of. Nobody spoke. I walked toward the door. My father called after me. You'll regret this. I stopped. For a second, the old fear returned. Maybe he was right. Maybe I was throwing away security. Maybe $52,000 was better than uncertainty. Maybe my parents knew something I didn't. Then I remembered all the nights I had stayed awake imagining my own company. The software ideas. The business plans. The notes filling my laptop. The dreams I had been too afraid to pursue. I turned around. No. My father stared at me. I don't think I will. Then I walked out. I had no idea that decision would eventually make me wealthy. I didn't know that within 3 years, my company would employ dozens of people. I didn't know that major corporations would one day compete for my services. And I certainly didn't know that the same parents who had called me a disappointment would eventually sit across from me and ask for my help. All I knew that night was this. For the first time in my life, I had chosen myself. And that was worth far more than $52,000. The next morning, I woke up at 6 with the contract still sitting on my kitchen table. For a few seconds, I wondered if I had made a terrible mistake. $52,000 wasn't nothing. It was steady money, health insurance, a predictable schedule, a position at a respected law firm, and my parents would finally stop worrying about me. But then I remembered Daniel's face when I asked whether he had agreed to the arrangement. He hadn't looked proud. He had looked relieved, as if my acceptance would solve a problem for him. I picked up the contract, tore it in half, and threw it away. Then I opened my laptop. I created a new document. At the top, I typed, business plan. For the next 6 hours, I worked. I wrote down every problem I'd noticed in my previous job, every inefficient process, every software tool companies were paying too much for, every service clients desperately needed but couldn't afford. By sunset, I had a 12-page plan. It wasn't perfect, but it was mine. I called my former colleague, Marcus. I want to start something. There was silence. Then he laughed. You've been saying that for years. This time I'm serious. How much money do you have? I checked my bank account. About $18,000. That won't last long. I know. What are you building? I explained the idea. Marcus became quiet. Then he said, I'll help. That was the beginning. We rented a tiny office above a dentist's practice. The carpet smelled old. The air conditioner barely worked. There were 2 desks and 1 whiteboard. But every morning, I walked through that door feeling like I had finally arrived somewhere. We built a business management platform for companies that couldn't afford expensive enterprise software. Our first version was ugly. Very ugly. The buttons were badly designed. The dashboard looked like something from 10 years earlier. But it worked. And more importantly, it solved a real problem. Our first customer was a small furniture company. The owner had been using 6 different spreadsheets to track inventory. We connected everything into one system. He saved 12 hours a week. Then he introduced us to another business. That business introduced us to another. 6 months later, we had 30 customers. A year later, we had 200. Then something unexpected happened. A national distributor contacted us. They wanted to use our platform across 140 locations. The contract was worth $900,000. I stared at the email for nearly a minute. Marcus shouted, "Ryan." I looked at him. "We did it." I smiled. "No." He frowned. "What?" "We're just getting started." The next few years passed like a storm. We hired employees. We opened offices. We developed new products. We expanded into logistics, retail, and manufacturing. I went from worrying about paying rent to worrying about whether our servers could handle millions of transactions. One morning, I walked into the office and saw our employee count on the screen. 184 employees. I stood there silently. I thought about the folding table in my apartment, the $52,000 contract, my father's words. "You'll regret this." I smiled. I hadn't. But my family had not disappeared from my life completely. My mother still called occasionally. At first, I didn't answer. Then, after nearly a year, I picked up. "Hello." There was silence. Then she said, "Ryan." "Yes." She started crying. "I've missed you." I closed my eyes. "I've missed you too. Your father is angry." "Why?" "He says you won't listen." I almost laughed. "About what?" "He thinks you're making a mistake with your company." I stared at the office around me. "We're doing okay." "That's not what he means." "What does he mean?" "He thinks you're taking unnecessary risks." I sighed. "Mom, I'm happy." Another silence. "Are you?" "Yes." Then that's all I wanted to hear. It was the closest thing to an apology she had ever given me. I thought that was the end of it. It wasn't. 2 years later, our company received an invitation to bid on a massive corporate contract. The client was one of the largest legal networks in the country. I didn't know Daniel's firm was one of their subsidiaries until I walked into the conference room and saw my brother sitting across the table. He froze. I froze too. Neither of us spoke. Finally, he said, "Ryan." I nodded.